There's a building in Pioneer Square that sits at First and Washington. It sprouted from the tidal plains along Puget Sound to anchor a series of new hotels and businesses, those that would mark Seattle's rebirth from the Great Fire of 1889. Change and chaos have haunted this sturdy red brick building. Right from its opening in 1890, it adapted to the needs of Seattle citizens. It morphed from a business headquarters to an Alaska Gold Rush hotel, next a saloon for 10 years, then a gambling hall, and another reinvention as a cafe during Prohibition, one serving soft drinks. In 1936, it settled down as a hotel and remained so for 34 years. The last 10 years haven't been so kind to this Pioneer Square original. It's had 3 owners, suffered through 2 bankruptcies, and it finally shut down in October 2019. Unpaid taxes shuttered its doors this time. But the J&amp Hotel, now J&amp Cafe, has a way of bouncing back, and its ghosts may be the jolt it needs for another rebirth. Welcome, Ghostly fans. You've got Jake from Ghostly Activities. Today we're going to talk about some ghost hunting at the J&amp Cafe, which is one of the original buildings in Pioneer Square that has a bit of a haunted reputation. And to help me out will be June Nixon, who's vice president of AGHOST, the Advanced Ghost Hunters of Seattle-Tacoma, who has a long history of investigating Pioneer Square as well as the J&amp Cafe. And so with that, June.
Well, Jake, it's really kind of a hard question about why Pioneer Square is so haunted. One of the things is it is where Seattle first started. Seattle is, by all accounts, a really new city compared to the rest of the United States. So a lot of people think, well, surely you don't have as many ghost stories as, Philadelphia or, the East Coast. And, we do. We have a lot of ghost stories and a lot of places in Pioneer Square that is haunted. In June 6th, 1889, we had our Great Seattle Fire. I could say that, there were so many deaths and just, so many deaths at that time, but no one died in that Great Seattle Fire. But this is when they rebuilt the whole city to make the problems that they had before, a lot better. So, it's one of those things. It was a Wild West town. There were a lot of, brothels. There were a lot of, shootouts. It was pretty lawless for quite a while. So, maybe that's where it all comes from.
Yeah, and I've done a little research into it too, and it looks like Seattle has one of those mysterious ley lines running right smack dab through the middle of it. So, folks, if you don't know what a ley line is, it's sort of this mystical energy band that allows weirdness to develop. And also means you probably get some ghosts. But
or other ley lines, that is where I said where the brothels were.
Yeah.
Sorry, just had to throw that in there.
This is the deadline. This is the deadline ley line. So if you don't know Seattle, if you're south of, was it Washington or is it First Street or Cherry Street? If you're south of that was I get prostitute land.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, pretty much. And for quite a long time.
Yeah, but Seattle itself, for one thing, we have the whole thing about water holding mystical energy and spiritual energy. Which,
you never know.
Yeah, believe me, the whole city, where it's developed now, it's all a tidal plain, so you got a lot of water.
Right, exactly.
You've got the Native American rituals and history with it as well. And you're right, though, about the Wild West. One of the most famous spots, Merchant's Cafe, was a scene of a couple of some notorious activity there. One was like real life activity people. That was a big shootout between a corrupt cop. Some innocents were killed there, and a hanging And that
Right.
was so most people don't realize that area of Pioneer Square was prone to random acts of hanging whoever was in the jail, and they would be taken
Hmm.
right up to the square and hanged from there. There's a big old tree there with a nice horizontal branch, and they hung them there. They didn't really care necessarily about total
Right.
guilt and
They're
innocence.
vigilante justice. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But leading into the J&M, we've
Yes.
got the rats, because a million or more rats died in the Great Fire, which is a good
Could be
segue to the J&M, because if you've been to the J&M, well, rats are
a
always
little way of life.
accompanying you upon your underground adventure.
And who knows how many ghost rats are around there too, Jake.
Very good,
You
especially in
just
that
never know.
alleyway when you see all those rat traps around the garbage
Yeah.
cans. But we
It's
love
like,
you,
oh,
Seattle, and the city of
yeah.
Seattle, because you're cleaning things up and making sure that the rats aren't giving us plague. So
Right,
that's a
exactly.
good thing. Yes.
That is really what I do have to say that is really one interesting thing, and I didn't discover that until I was investigating the J&M Cafe, is that Seattle comes through with these huge trucks of like deodorizer and or was not antiseptic. What am I trying to say? To make anything the
Plague killer.
alleyways, yes, the alleyways cleaner,
Okay,
and it smells better too.
that's true.
So that's one of the reasons that Seattle does not stink.
One of the notoriously clean alleyways is right next to J&M Cafe. And in early November 2019, a ghost, which is our ghost hunting group, did an investigation. And this is
Hmm.
shortly after the shuttering of the J&M Cafe. So, with that, June, can you tell us about how this investigation came to be? And we'll talk a little bit about the
Sure.
evidence.
Well, we found out that the J&M had been closed, and a lot of the tour guides, when they were still going in there, they kept hearing footsteps and loud noises right above when they knew that there was no one in the cafe, which is the bar area upstairs. And so they were like, there is some activity going on. We need to get in there while there's not, the bar going on and everything. We need to get in there to see if we can investigate because something strange is happening. So we get a small or medium-sized team to kind of go in and see what's going on. And right away, I'm thinking that we're going to debunk this really quick because a lot of people don't realize that the little falafel restaurant that's right next door to it is actually a part of the building. So the whole J&M Cafe also includes that little falafel bar. So I was just thinking, well, I've debunked it. That's all that's going on. Is on the underground part, the falafel restaurant is right above in the underground too. So that's kind of one of the things that we were kind of thinking that was probably it and everything. So we made sure first that looked in the windows to make sure no one was up in the bar area. There was a little homeless guy sleeping in front of the doors, and he said no one had been in or out.
Okay.
Just saying.
And just so
Um,
you know, if he's going crazy and jumping up and down on the sidewalk, you're not going to hear that
no,
down
you
there.
are not going to hear that. You could not hear the sidewalk traffic unless somebody was wearing really heavy concrete shoes or something like that. But no one, I don't think, was doing that.
Yeah, that's true because if you're not familiar with the J&M, the ceiling, well, there's a tunnel-like structure. That is the sidewalk
Hmm.
from the city back in the day, but you really can't hear people walking across it. Though, because the back part of the J&M Cafe, where you enter it on that nice frothy clean alleyway, if someone's there and screaming and stuff, you could hear that
Right,
in the
right, yeah,
basement, but that
yes.
didn't happen.
No, no, no. Well, one of the things we tried, one of the things that a ghost does, we try to debunk everything first what it could be first. We're hearing these noises. What could it be? So some of the team, of course, went upstairs with flashlights, looking in the windows just to make sure that no one was in the bar, and then went next door to the Falafel House. And some of us stayed downstairs, the others were upstairs and called us and said, okay, this is us walking in the Falafel House. So the thing was, which I thought was going to be a shut and dry, kind of case, we did not hear them walking across. We just heard the boards squeak. So we were like, that's really strange. So one of the things too, we heard, the furniture moving. It sounded really far off, but we did hear them moving the chair back and forth. We heard it when they were stomping, which the people in the falafel place probably thought they were insane because they were stomping.
They're in Pioneer Square. So
yes.
there's
they probably didn't even give them a second glance. But what was really interesting was we heard somebody, it sounded like heavy boots walking across the floor. And I said, okay, I hear someone walking across the floor. And at that time, no one was walking across the floor in the Falafel House. So that kind of threw a lot of the theories out. I know a lot of the noises and things like that probably were that little restaurant, but now we're starting to think, well, what or who is that walking? And why is it so loud? Because it sounds like, somebody in extremely heavy cowboy boots walking across the floor. What's really strange is us not hearing our team walking that hard. Even though they're not wearing hard-soled shoes, they are stomping. And all we're hearing basically is very light, very, very light thuds. And the board squeaking. So that was really fascinating. We don't know where those heavy footsteps came from. And they walked exactly over where the team was when they were upstairs. So that was fascinating.
When it comes to the phantom sounds in the J&M, so for a haunting activity, guys, J&M is known for its phantom sounds.
Mm-hmm.
So the one claim is you can hear people playing billiards.
Right.
Did you have that night?
We did. It was really fascinating because we know that there was no one in the bar. And we're over in another area. We start hearing it really sounds like billiard balls falling on the floor and bouncing.
Oh, wow.
And it sounded like several times that we heard, basically balls clanking and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So we could not debunk that. We have no idea where that came from. So that was kind of, fascinating because we were just like,
Yeah, when I read most of the activity from the main floor, which is where the card room / saloon / bar was, is you hear a lot about the residual haunting there, which makes sense with the footsteps and for sure with the billiards.
Exactly.
But when it comes to intelligent type hauntings, did you have anything that would be considered in that classification?
We did not at that time, but I've heard a lot of different stories from other people that have had some really strange things happen. One of the things was the woman that was downstairs. I don't know if you've gone over that yet, but the woman that was downstairs and went downstairs to get a keg or something to bring it back up to the bar. She was one of the waitresses. And she was bent over, and all of a sudden something smacked her on the butt.
Oh, my.
And and she was just like, whoa. And another woman had said that she felt like all of a sudden she had been groped.
What?
And she turned around to like deck somebody because she thought it was like one of her coworkers being a jerk.
Mm-hmm.
And there was nobody there. And both of those women decided never to come down there again. People have reported getting their hair pulled, hair tugged. Other women actually have even come forward and saying that they thought they felt somebody pinch their butt.
Oh, wow.
Things like that. So, there might be a little bit of a horny ghost down there too. So, you never know.
Okay, let's be real. It was the Wild Wild West. And for most of the time that it was active. So, guys, the J&M, I put this in the intro, but it was built right after the Great Fire, 1889, but it
Hmm.
was really heavily involved in the hospitality business from about that period through 1970. But if you really look at the, I guess, fresh period of activity, it'd probably be 1896, I believe, through 1934. That's when it was Gold Rush Hotel slash Flop
Hmm.
House.
Right.
It's been a saloon. It's been a cafe during Prohibition time. Cafe means is code word for
Hmm.
speakeasy.
Yeah, it's a cafe. They
It's
call
a
it a cafe
cafe.
because, this is where you can just come and get some coffee and,
Mm-hmm.
relax and,
Mm-hmm.
things like that. But yeah, we know what's really going on underneath.
Yeah, it was a gambling hall for a long time. Well, they call it card room. That's just at
Hmm.
the time they hadn't gambling wasn't illegal, so it transformed to something else after that. But from 1936 to 1970, it was a hotel. But Pioneer Square was a little seedy at the
Yeah.
time. We had prostitution going around.
At
Um,
that time, at that time, Pioneer Square had really kind of plummeted to ruin. It was almost the whole area was almost condemned. You know, there were. It was just amazing how much they almost. I can't even talk. I'm sorry. They almost tore down all of the buildings around there because it was in such disarray. But that's when all of a sudden the people rallied together and said, no, this is our historical area. You can't tear this down. And then that's when they started like cleaning things up and believe it or not, it's a lot. It's really cleaned up since the 1970s.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
let's just say the exterior, which means sidewalks and parks and stuff, might be a little, shady and stuff, but the buildings are in really good shape. It's got well maintained sidewalks. They just redid the road. So the city has invested in preserving Pioneer Square.
Right.
And
And it was the Skid Road
hmm
area, and that's because of the logging plant that was right there.
hmm
And when you call it the Skid Road, that's when that's like they would chop all the trees down and then push them down the hill, and it would skid down the road,
hmm
and that's why they call it the Skid Road. But it also meant the poor section.
yeah, if you were south of Skid Row.
Right. So it's very interesting
Yeah, which the J&M
history.
is south
Hmm.
of First
It is. It
by
is.
a few
In
blocks.
Cherry. Yeah.
So then with this investigation, I heard you had a physical interaction with the spirit? What?
I did. It could have been that, but there was a really weird. All of a sudden, I was doing an EVP session and I said, if there's anybody in here with us, can you give us a sign? When all of a sudden, first of all, I felt really cold and got goosebumps. And I was like, whoa, okay, that's kind of weird
So you
because it
got the
was like an
heebie-jeebies.
electrical charge. Yeah,
Yep.
it was like an electrical charge going up my spine. And when all of a sudden I felt like something was playing with my hair and pulling my hair. So I tell the other guys, I said, okay, guys, something's playing with my hair. And they run over and I tried to record it, but let's just say I did not get the hair. Basically, I just got the top of my head because I had it in my hand and I thought I had it far enough back, but we won't discuss that. Anyway, they were looking at it and they said that a piece of my hair was going up and then twirling around. So, they saw this. I did not get to see it, but I felt it. It felt like I was having a little bit of electrical charge. I thought, well, maybe this is just static electricity. I can't 100% say that it was a ghost playing with my hair, but it was really interesting. Like I said,
Mhm.
I was feeling, electrically charged. If you can say that. It was very, very charging.
Yeah, in the regard to the static electricity, this isn't something where static just all of a sudden kicks up. If you have
Right.
static like static cling and stuff like that, it's persistent.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's a short period of time where your hair does the twisting and sticks up and stuff like that, then I would say you've got it's a bit more credible for a
Right.
ghostly claim. for me, me, I'm all about the evidence.
Right. Evidence,
And so I would have had a camera on her the whole time.
evidence. Yeah, that would have been really smart.
And we'll talk about that when we wrap up our learnings from our investigation.
Yes. Yes.
But was there anything else that stood out that night? I know Tammy Lynn, who's one of the investigators on site, was doing an EVP session, and she had a K2 that was getting hits during that questioning. But again, for me,
Right now,
feel free to disagree. It's a K2. It's an old building with exposed wiring.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would have been, and we can talk about that too. It would have been a little more credible if we had a couple of, different electromagnetic field measurements to see what was happening, because the K2 is extremely sensitive. It goes off with anything. But it was kind of interesting where when she was asking the questions, it was like it was answering.
Mm-hmm.
Which, it's like take it with a grain of salt or whatever, but it could have been something.
Yeah.
Maybe it was, maybe we did have a little bit of an intelligent,
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
can't 100% say for sure.
True. And this is, folks, this was an opportunistic investigation. So it was pretty much, we could get in, let's go. And you go with what you've got at the time that it's available. I know the team is still going through their audio recording, so when I get those EVPs and or movements, I'll update the J&amp Ghost Hunt report.
Cool.
But on it, I also have a section for the 2013 investigation, which was in a different part of the hotel. So, June, can you tell us about the parts that people don't get to see anymore?
Yes, I was so lucky that the owner at that time, and like I said, this was 2013, around that time period, was like, would you like to come over and see the hotel part? It's like, well, yeah. The stairs to get there is not in the J&M. You have to go through the little falafel restaurant to get to the stairs to get up there. Now, at the time, the owner of the J&M was a bit of a hoarder, so he had a lot of his stuff upstairs. So we had to kind of maneuver through a lot of different things to kind of get up there, because there was a lot of old junk and things like that. So I don't know if you see some of the pictures in there. That's kind of what that's from.
I do have those pictures on Ghostly, folks.
From what I hear, the junk has been cleared out now. They were thinking about revising it and making it into a hotel again. So this used to be the old J&M hotel that was above. It was really incredible. You could kind of see, a glimpse of probably the way it used to look. There were some portions of it that still kind of had a ratty red carpet. You just think, wow, this place must have really looked amazing. There were some areas where there was part of a chandelier that was kind of still up there. And
so it was in pretty rough shape.
Yeah, it was in a lot of rough shape. But I mean, I couldn't believe how big this place was. There were tiny rooms. A lot of rooms had bathtubs in them, and there was a sign someplace that said like a bath for 10 cents, something like that, or 5 cents, 10 cents. So you could go in there and get a bath, which, probably at the time was probably a really nice thing.
Yeah, that was Wild West days. That's like 1890s, early 1900s right there.
Pay for a bath. But yeah, there was an old plaque sign on the wall that said that, which was pretty cool.
Yeah.
It was really, really interesting. We had a lot of strange things happen that night. And it was really strange too, because you couldn't hear the band very much. You would think that the sound would carry up there and there'd be a lot of the music from downstairs, but you could barely hear it. So that floor must be really thick in the hotel part above the bar.
But I could totally understand that, because I mean, it is the hotel. People are paying to sleep.
Yep, that's true. That's true.
So you got to make sure
But
you soundproof it pretty well.
there were some areas that the floor was like rotted through.
Oh,
So yeah, that was something. You had to really be careful. Some of the rooms were, I think it was a lot of water damage through the years and things like that. But the ceilings, I mean, maybe 15, 20-foot ceilings. The windows were the huge old windows, beveled glass. Um, I mean, it's still all original stuff from, the 1890s when they had built it up. Um, and everything. So we really got lucky to
and
do.
trivia on this one. When the J&M building was put in, well, it was I think it was John Marshall building. It was only 2 floors. So and what happened was I checked out the Seattle archives, the building permits and stuff, which I've got a link to online. You can get to
Mm-hmm.
it from Ghostly Activities in the report. So you can read the archival history. And this is like titles, building permits. The third floor, so the topmost floor, was added either in 1900 or 1903.
Oh, cool.
There's two conflicting reports. So the Seattle archives puts it out there. It's like, we've got some conflicting information. It could have been 1900 or 1903. But they added it after the building
Wow,
was put up.
that's
And
very cool.
yeah.
Made you more of the hotel.
Yeah, and they think it was just because of the Alaska gold rush
I'm sure, yeah.
and they needed the extra space. But speaking of the ghost hunts at the J&M, let's just call it the J&M Hotel since we're talking
Okay.
about the
Now
hotel
we're
part.
talking about the upstairs. Yes.
So you were there with Ross, and I didn't recognize the other investigators, but there was some EVP evidence and some
Mhm.
anomalies.
Yes, yes. One of the things that happened, which I think we did the investigation in January or February, so it was cold already up there. I remember going into this one room and being hit with a blast of heat. I'm not even talking, like, oh, I felt a little warm, something a little warm. I'm talking a hit of heat. And I was like, whoa, is there a vent from downstairs that's up here? But we were on the third floor at the time, so that would have been more ludicrous because there was absolutely no heat, no vents, nothing, especially the old radiators, even though they were really cool to look at because they had a lot of the filigree and things like that on them. So it was very fancy. Um, but it's like there's no other there was no place up there that could, blast you with heat. Um, One of the things that a lot of people think is that, when you're going through a place and you hit a cold spot, a lot of people think that a spirit or entity is kind of taking all of the energy out of the air, so it makes this cold spot. Well, other people think that if a spirit is ready to manifest itself in some way, that it releases a lot of this cold to make it, maybe a hot spot.
Hmm.
Sadly, we did not see anything, but not too long after that, we got a strange EVP when Ross and I walked into this one room. The other investigators were at a completely different side of this place, and it is huge. You can't hardly hear anything that's going on in another area. So yeah, we walked into this room and didn't hear anything with our own ears, but when we listened to the recording later, there was somebody else definitely in the room with us.
Yeah, I was going to say I did. So if you go to the ghost hunt report from the 2013 investigation, I curated 2. So I picked out 2 of the EVPs collected
Yeah.
because I could hear a woman respond to questions asked by Ross. Now, Ross Allison, who's the founder of A Ghost and Spooked in Seattle, he was not asking the questions as part of an EVP. It was asked to just looking at stuff in the rooms, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And well, it's because this is a podcast, so you may not listen to it. I have the unaltered files out on Ghostly. Listen to them, but I know he's talking about statuary or something in the background. or looking at the statuary, and you can hear a woman's voice saying, "Yes, it's in the background."
Mm-hmm.
And then in a second one, I can hear a woman's voice. And of course, I didn't put up my notes because I'm looking at the report right now. I didn't want to like lead you into hearing the second one, but there's another short answer that goes like, I know.
Mm-hmm. Now, I think the first one, though, I think that I, yeah, I would love to hear what other people think it says, but I think it says something because we were looking up at the roof at the time and looking around at all the filigree and things like that that were on, because there were still some rooms that had the old tin type roof that had a lot of the filigrees in it.
Okay, the pressed tin stuff.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And you know, I think it might be commenting on us looking up at something.
Yeah, I think that was it. But there was also the it's in the background or something like that.
Yeah.
I heard that one pretty clearly.
So yeah, it was some interesting.
Was there anything else in there? Because when I was reviewing the audio that you sent me, thank you very much for sending, and the pictures you sent me, was there anything besides the heat anomalies and EVPs that you collected?
I'm trying to think. I know that there were a few other interesting things that happened. We were also with Merlin, who she's a really, I have to say, she's very gifted with. She has some abilities that are, have knocked my socks off several times. Well, Merlin, I've been on several investigations with her that is just like we don't tell anybody anything about the place we're going, and I have even picked her up and not even let her like drive to the place. And all of a sudden, she'll start telling me things that are specific to what the client has told me, and it's just like, wow. I mean, specific stuff, not like, oh, I feel the presence of a spirit right in that corner. And, but Merlin, in her case, she has like said some things that's just like, how in the hell do you know? Are you bugging me? Is there like a microphone in my purse? And so she had several things happen, and she said that, what I remember, that she felt the presence of an elderly woman that was kind of, still in the halls, and, glimpses of women and men and things like that. Unfortunately, I just can't remember some of the other things that happened to her, and she's been so busy she hadn't been able to get back to me. But yeah, it was very impressive. But it was amazing. I'm just so I feel so privileged that I got to see up there. And what's really something is there are so many other bars and places like that with these abandoned hotels, abandoned places that are on their top floors. There's so many other places like that. And you just think, wow, if they could bring that back to its opulence and yeah, that would be amazing. Probably bring in more tourists too.
On the subject of opulence,
Yes.
and guessing about the past, let's address a couple of myths, legends, and or conspiracies about the J&amp. So, the brothel.
Mm-hmm.
It was south of the deadline. It was common, if you have a hotel.
Right, exactly.
You've got some soiled doves hanging around on the top floors.
Yeah.
I did not find anything to explicitly state, that even arrests or something like that they had any prostitutes at the J&amp hotel.
Well, I really don't think that they did a lot of arresting back then. I think because of our, let's not say government, but the governing bodies that be in Seattle were extremely crooked at that time. There
Yes,
is
they
evidence
were.
with that.
Yes, we have lots of evidence of crooked cops.
And that also happened, with the gay bars and things like that. One of the really amazing reasons that a lot of the gay bars did not get raided, things like that back in the day, is that they paid the police off. So I'm sure that, probably a lot of the madams at that time, if they did run a little, prostitution ring, that they paid the law off to turn their backs on a
Hmm.
lot of that when it became illegal. I'm not sure when prostitution became illegal in Seattle.
Yeah,
Because
I've
I'm
got
sure
no
in the
idea.
day that because since this was a Wild West town and
Hmm.
some of the boys needed servicing,
Hmm.
that
I wouldn't be surprised if it goes up to prohibition. Pretty
yeah,
much once
prohibition,
prohibition kicked
everything was
in, and
like
when
everything good
1919,
and fun was kicked off.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, they
cut
cracked
off
down
from
on
the people.
everything. So I know with some of the madams in town, it was in the early 1920s that their heyday ended for the
Mm,
most part.
that's so.
Yeah. The other part of it, and this was only referenced in one article, and it was alluded to, was that the former hotel part was a drug den.
Hmm.
And if you read the Crosscut article, which I've linked to on Ghostly, you can read an interview with a company called, I think, Seneca Partners or Seneca Ventures bought the hotel from a bankruptcy from this gentleman named whose last name's Butnick. The Butnick family goes way back in Seattle's history, and they had to clean it out because he was the hoarder June mentioned. They spent like
Yeah.
$14,000 to clear out the place, and he alluded to, either the guy was on drugs or there's some drug paraphernalia. So if you read the article for all the deets, it's in there. Uh, I wouldn't be surprised if it was, because it was vacant for a long time. I thought more of the drug history would be the basement, but when you think about it, the cafe was using the basement for storage and everything, so
Right.
probably not. But in the
Hmm.
hotel, that the top two floors, that I'm not doubting that part of
Hmm.
it.
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt it either. It's yeah. I think that whole area was kind of shady, a
Hmm.
little shady.
Yeah, and there was a period I think where it was vacant from the 70s or something. I know in the 90s, I think the Butnicks took over it, or they wound up with the assets somehow.
Hmm.
But
Be.
it might have been vacant from 1994 to later in the 1990s. And 1994 was a bankruptcy. One of the bankrupt. This building has had a lot of bankruptcy, folks.
Yeah, it
It
really
might have been
has.
vacant, so that could jive. But again, it's been alluded to. I couldn't find any arrest records or raiding records from the police, because the 90s you can get details for that still.
Right.
And I didn't read any police reports about, say, raids in the J&M. Maybe back in the day,
You never
but
know.
not. I'll call it the modern era. In this case, for the J&M, the modern era, I'll say, is the
Hmm.
70s onward.
Yeah, but like I said, that the police were at the whole town commission was pretty corrupt at that time,
Mm-hmm.
and there's public record saying that. One of the things that I love, there's an article where Spooked in Seattle is now at First and Cherry. Um, was it used to be kind of a bar where men could meet young women,
Mm.
and there is a newspaper article written about it, and about basically it's a house of ill repute. It's not really a house, a place of ill
Mm-hmm.
repute. And I guess the mayor frequented the place with
Oh,
the chief of police. Let's just
my.
say.
Okie doke.
So yeah, it's a really interesting. I'll try to get that. I do have a copy of it somewhere. I had
Okay.
to make a copy of it, and I'll try to get that so you
Okay.
can
Well, if you
post
give
that
me
on the
the
page.
headline
Yeah.
and the reporter and the publication, I'll go look it up and see if I can get
Yes,
a link
it's
to the
it's
online or a
easy. It
PDF.
was easy to get.
Okay.
I do know that.
Okay.
So, but
Aces. So moving on, two big investigations. What are some key learnings for ghost hunters if they get to the J&M? And we'll talk about how you can visit the J&M Cafe. But what have we learned besides, have your camera ready?
Yeah, that's a big thing right there. It's like record everything, and then also too when you're changing batteries, your batteries all of a sudden are sucked dry, which actually also did happen. I forgot to mention
Oh.
that. It's like a couple of things all of a sudden. It's like, what?
Mm.
Just put new batteries in there, and then all of a sudden they're completely drained. But when you do have something like that, or if with your recorder or your camera, make sure you have another camera going when you're changing the batteries or another audio recorder going when you're changing the batteries, because that's probably when something's going to happen. I think spirits know this and go, hee. That's my time to act.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, that's a big thing right there. And when you feel physical phenomenon, one of the big things is, and I just kicking myself, um, to say, okay, you with the camera, come here and record this. Not me with my camera trying to
Hmm.
record it as I'm trying to hold it in the back of my head to get the recording, and all I get is, you know, the top of my head
Hmm.
and nothing. So
Yeah, and guys, for
so
ghost
yeah.
hunters, a lot of times you think, oh, I've always got to have an infrared or a full spectrum camera. No, just any old camera or
Yeah,
camcorder will work. The important thing is to document the evidence. It doesn't
exactly.
have to be the purple, the green, the gray light.
No, it does not. It does not have to be that. But yeah, just when things like that, I am kicking myself because, when my hair was being twirled, I should have told Melissa to come over and film it. She was just filming me having the phenomena. I should have had her come around and film it, even with her, video camera on her phone, even just to have a record of it. It might have been a little too dark to see, but you put the flash on there, probably could have seen it. So yeah, I'm kicking myself about that because, it's like, June.
I
Things
would,
like that.
yeah, I would
Yes.
say the other thing is get to your evidence reviews, your evidence analysis right away.
Right, right, right.
Yeah, because, if you don't document it, can be lost to time. So luckily,
That
like
is
with the
true. Like
23
me.
investigation, we've got pictures and we've got the EVP files, but, the experiential stuff.
Hmm.
eh,
Well, that is one thing. Even if it is an impromptu investigation, we should treat it like a real investigation, and write things down, things like that. A lot of times when I go to these little impromptu ones, I don't think of it as a real investigation. So I'm like, oh, I'll get to the evidence, someday. But like Jake says, all of a sudden someday, you're doing it like 3 months later. It's like, oh, what was that? Because like I said, I'm getting senile now, I'm
Yeah.
getting up there in age, and it's just one of those things, when he says, what else happened in 2013? It's like, oh my God, I remember walking up some stairs. I remember the windows, I remember the ceilings, and things like that. But, you know, if it's not written down to refresh my memory, it's like, you know, it's gone.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, and I
so yeah,
think the
Jake is
important,
right.
yeah, is
Yeah.
the important thing is just start the documentation of it because we live in a digital media world now. You can put the
Yeah.
pictures, you can put the EVPs up later in an evidence gallery. That's pretty much how I run Ghostly. But I
Yes.
write everything that happened first.
Yep.
And because, like I said, it's the web. You can go back and update the reports whenever you need to.
Exactly. Just write the basic thing down,
Hmm.
and then go in later to add things when you're going through the recordings and things like that too.
Yeah.
But
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 for
you
our
are right.
yeah,
Yes.
but for our ghost hunting friends out there, to get to J&M Cafe, it is possible to get inside the J&M Cafe. How
Hmm.
would one go about doing that, June?
Well, you could actually go to spookedinseattle.com and book a tour. One of the best tours is with Ross Allison on a Friday night. I think he does it at 8:30,
Oh, the
8:30, I
extended
think
pub,
now.
or
The
not the pub,
extended,
extended
yeah,
tour. Yeah,
tour.
extended Pioneers
Um,
tours.
Some tour guides do not take you down into the J&M.
Okay.
So, but Ross definitely does. So if you have a Friday night free at, I think it's at 8:30 most of the time, but he might have moved it around 8 o'clock to
Hmm.
8:30. You just need to look on their website at spookedinseattle.com and, book that time. But it's usually on Friday nights. Or if you have a group that you would like to, go in there, you can contact Spooked in Seattle and they could even do a special ghost hunt
Hmm.
time. So, if you want to do something like that, even.
And then, of course, you can always join a ghost,
Hmm.
and there's impromptu investigations.
We do. We're going to start trying to have our meetings at the basically the basement part of Merchants Cafe now. Spooked in Seattle is where we used to have our meetings, and unfortunately, there was some severe water damage, so we will not be able to meet down there because they're going to be revamping and overhauling the whole area. So we're going to start having our meetings at Merchants Cafe in the basement on the second and fourth Sundays of the month around 3:30. That's when it's going to start, unless there is a game going on.
But at least in February, we know there's no baseball, there's no
Yes,
soccer, and there's no football because the Super
exactly.
Bowl's in early February.
And if you have any questions at all, you can reach me at a ghost. It's like trying to say my email address, a ghost junevp at gmail.com. That's AGHOST JUNE V as in Victor, P as in Paul at gmail.com. So
And
that's a
I'll
ghost
put that in the post too.
junevp at.
Yeah, I'll
So
put that on the podcast page.
any questions at all, and I will answer or try to.
Hmm. Well then, thank you for coming on, June,
Well, thank
and
you.
yeah, not a problem. Next time you hear from us, might be in a week or two, we'll be discussing the Shady Lady Bordello in
Ooh,
Centralia,
yes.
Washington. We have so much
One of my favorite
evidence.
places. Evidence.
All right. Thanks very much, guys, for tuning in, and just keep watching ghostlyactivities.podbean.com for new episodes.
Yay.
Yay. Take care.
Bye.